everybody. This is so cool. I've missed you. Usually I teach this Parsha class Monday. I've been teaching it 9 years for the Women Houston community. And Baruch Hashem, that Torch has given me the opportunity to continue teaching and staying in touch with my holy sisters in Houston. But now it's also available to all via Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. And it also will get recorded. So what I love to do is to take the Parsha and kind of bring it home. Like, what does the Parsha mean to me today? Like today, I open the book. How do I do homework with this? So we're in Parashat Balak. So what I'm going to do is a quick overview of the Parsha. And then I'm going to develop like 3-4 points from this Parsha that are kind of applicable for us today. So Balak is the king of Moab. And he summons the prophet Bilam to curse the Jewish people. He hates the Jewish people. He is watching the Jewish people approaching his land. And he is getting nervous. So his weapon is, let me curse them and I'll weaken them spiritually. So he gets himself a wizard, someone from like Harry Potter's school, but one of the evil guys, not Harry Potter. You could tell I don't read Harry Potter books because I don't know the names of the characters. But talk to my 10-year-old, she would be able to tell you. So he calls on a bad guy, Bilam. And on the way to go curse the Jewish people, he's riding his donkey, and something really strange, unbelievable happens. And he's not smoking anything, right, Bilam? And his donkey starts to talk to him and is berating him, his donkey. And he says, why are you hitting me? Because the donkey kept stopping and Bilam kept hitting his donkey. And the donkey kept, stumbling and swaying away from the path. And Bilam was getting very, very frustrated. It's like, hey, I have a mission. I got to go curse the Jewish people. And I got to get there before a certain time, before he turns into a pumpkin. And you, donkey, are just not working with me. What's happening? And the donkey actually opens up her mouth. And this is not Shrek. She starts talking to Bilam and says, why? Why are you treating me like this? I've been a very loyal donkey to you all these years. And why are you hitting me and treating me this way? I don't think that you should go on this path, And she says to him that there's an angel of God that is sending, that Hashem sent to block their way. And for 3 different times, vantage points, Bilam attempts to pronounce his curses. Each time, blessings are issued forth instead. So Bilam also prophesizes on the end of days. So he's not managing to curse the Jewish people. And for some reason, the donkey talking to him does not sway him and does not change his mind from going on his mission. I feel like if a donkey spoke to me and said, hey, I don't think it's a really good mission for you to go and curse so-and-so, I would reconsider my mission, right? But we'll talk about that later, how we're so one-track mind. Like when we're on a mission, especially when it's for an avera, for a sin, we're so passionate about it that even things that don't make sense, we can rationalize. Like that our desires can really sway us away from the right path. So that's what happened to Bilam, because Bilam was a prophet. And for him not to think that this was an extraordinary event is very strange. So Bilam attempts 3 times to curse the Jewish people, and every time blessings come out. And then Bilam prophesies about the end of days and the coming of Mashiach. So if you want to know details about the coming of Mashiach, look at this week's Parsha. And then the people of Israel fall prey to the charms of the daughters of Moab and are enticed to worship the idol of Peor. We're going to talk a little bit about what this idol was all about. When a high-ranking Israelite official publicly takes a Midianite princess, princess into his tent, Pinchas kills them both, stopping the plague raging among the people. So the word plague today it's too familiar, right? And I don't know if you heard, but in Israel right now, they're saying that there's this thing called the Delta variant, So they're giving a bad name to airlines, because Delta Airline. I don't even know if it still even exists, but now it's the name of a variant, a mutation of COVID. So there's a few cases in Israel. So some of the freedom that we gained is going away and some restrictions are coming back. But I do feel like we're in a very good place, Israel, and giving us the blessing. And if you're watching us from around the world or in Israel, please pray for the safety of Israel, for the health of the world, of all of the world, peace for Israel and peace on to the world, the whole world at large. So don't underestimate your prayers. They are very, very powerful. So there's a lot going on here. If this was a movie, it would have had wild soundtracks, starting with an evil king who wants to defeat the Jewish people, who wants to stop them from going into the land promised to them, and hiring a wizard. And then the wizard is making his way to curse the Jewish people. And instead, blessings come out. And then he ends up prophesying about the end of days and about the Messiah, about Mashiach. And then what happens to the Jewish people, that suddenly they fall prey to the charms of the daughters of Moab. So it says that suddenly they, like something happens to them and they begin sinning with the daughters of Moab. And this is on the 40th year, right before they're going to leave the desert and enter the promised land. And we are told that during the 210 years of the Jewish people in Egypt, in the exile in Egypt, they've never ever fallen to harlot. They've never strayed. They've never lived with the Gentiles, and they really kept to themselves. So what happened? What happened? They're here. This is the people that ate manna, that went through the desert, that saw miracles, that saw Hashem mamash with their own eyes. It was so revealed, right? What's happening here? So first we have to understand, Moab knew he wants to defeat the Jewish people. So he knew that he needs to attack them spiritually. So he tried through curses, and that didn't work. It was just, he didn't have the ability to do it. Then he says, you know what? I'm going to bring temptation. I'm going to open up like bars and like a strip, like a Vegas type of strip there. And, we'll tempt the Jewish people with gambling machines, women, beer, and all that. And we'll bring their spiritual status down. So he knew that the secret to the protection, the shield of the Jewish people is when they stay separate, right? That's what always kept us alive, right? We're the only ancient nation out here that's still speaking with the original language, Hebrew. And that's because we kept to ourselves throughout the generations. And he knew that in order to break them, he needed to defeat them spiritually, weaken them spiritually and morally, and that's how he will destroy them. So when the other side, the dark side, knows what our strength is, we need to recognize that strength as well. So that our strength is modesty, our strength is being separate, our strength is creating sanctuaries. Our homes become sanctuaries, sanctifying our life, our actions, our speech, our sight, whatever we come in touch with. We're always in mode to take the physical and make it spiritual, and not to delve down into the physicality, into temptations of the world. So that's why we hear now that he brings upon the temptations in order to defeat them. And that's when we hear about the plague, because now the Jewish people don't have the shield, the protection. They have sinned, they've gone astray, and they're not as strong as they were. And then Pinchas kills both that official that lived, the Nasi, the head of tribe that lived with the Midianite, and stops the plague among the people. Let's talk about the power of women, because I give this class to women. It's interesting that Bilam, when he came to curse the Jewish people, he noticed something very phenomenal, that the tents were situated in a way that the entrances to the tents, none of them faced one another. So everybody had privacy, which allowed for modesty. Okay? So it's nice to go camping with a bunch of families, but each family has to have their own privacy, their sanctity, the sanctuary of their own family, you know? It's nice to be one big happy family, but in the bottom line of it, you know, that's how we keep our koach, is by being strong and being private. People sometimes think that it's a contradictory. Like, oh, if we'll be public and it's all for all and everything is cool, you know, that's the ideal situation. We gain our strength from our individuality, our modesty, and our privacy. That does not take away from us being a nation. So he looked at the Jewish people, and the very famous prayer that we say, Matovu Alecha, it's the morning prayer of Shacharit. How beautiful are your tents, your dwellings, you know? Matovu Alecha, Mishkenotecha, Israel, your dwelling, Israel. Israel always refers, Matavu Alecha, Yaakov, Mishkenotecha, Israel. So Israel and Yaakov usually refers to the feminine side of the Jewish people. So we're talking about the femininity, the strength of Jewish women is modesty. That's our actual strength, not suppression, oppression. Being modest is what's gives us our strength. Sounds like maybe it could be an oxymoron, but it's not. A contradictory, but it's not. And he realized that their strength and the secret to the eternity of the Jewish people came from their homes. And the Jewish women in the desert managed to keep a holy life, right? Holiness, we know, another definition for the word holy is separate. So when we look at the week, Yom Chol is the mundane. And then we have Shabbat, Shabbat Kodesh, which is a holy day. It's separate than the mundane. It is separate than the weekday. That's the whole point of Shabbat. That is separate. Kiddushin, when a man and a woman are under a chuppah, the canopy, there's a ceremony that takes place called Kiddushin. Same root letters as Kadosh, holy. What's happening? These two people are sanctified to be with one another, but are now not allowed to be with anyone else in the world. So holiness we see as separation and unification, okay? Separating from the world, not allowed to be now with others, and they're married in a holy sanctity and allowed to one another. Where do we see this also? With Kiddush. Kiddush is the ceremony that we do on Shabbat to sanctify the day over wine, grape juice, and that is the ceremony that symbolizes that this day is holy and that it's separate, that it's different than Friday, that it's different than Thursday, that it's different than Sunday, that it's a day that we disconnect ourselves from physicality and completely reconnect with spirituality, right? We all need a day like this, you know. I remember Oprah had a campaign of like recognizing Shabbat and turning it into a family day. So take a day where you're just making a beautiful meal and disconnecting from digital, and everybody just sit and connect with one another. You know, we just sometimes don't realize with the craziness of the week that we're actually not talking to one another, you know? It's like sometimes I realize that I'm taking my phone into the bedroom, I'm looking at the phone, my husband's looking at the phone. So we have made a rule, don't bring the phones into the bedroom, you know, it's not right. And with the kids, you don't bring the phones, your phones, iPads to the table. It's not always working so well, I just have to say. It's such a temptation. So thank God for Shabbat that helps us to disconnect and to reconnect. And it's so interesting that it takes Bilam, this evil wizard that comes to curse us, to come and recognize our tents, you know, and recognize that there was a modesty system built into the encamping of the Israelites in the desert. It wasn't just stomp. And it must have taken a lot of wisdom to orchestrate that everybody had privacy, especially in conditions of camping in the desert for 40 years. So what we learn from this is that the koach of modesty and holiness is in the hands of the woman. We hold that key, and we really could bring draw so much kedusha down to our families by drawing holiness down into our families, into our nation, and that creates an amazing shield that even Bilam can't penetrate. Even Bilam can destroy. Now, we're reading something very interesting. I was reading this thing that in the beginning of the Parsha, we hear that Ammon and Moab, these two great nations, get nervous. They get pachad. Why? Because they hear that the Jewish people are making their way to the border, making their way to Israel through their countries. So what happened? Why did they have fear? They had the fear because they knew that this was a holy nation, and they knew that they didn't have any weapons to destroy holiness. That's why they came up with this plot to curse the Jewish people. That's why they came up with this plot to create like a Las Vegas arena kind of situation there, to bring them down spiritually and then attack them. So it's interesting. Midrash tells us that we were not allowed to attack Ammon or threaten them, but we're not allowed to attack Moab, but we're allowed to kind of demand and threaten them. And why are we not allowed to really go out there and do what we got to do? Is because from Ammon and Moab, very, very holy descendants came. Ruth and Naamah came from Ammon and Moab. So we have those two nations we're not allowed to, mess with. But yet we are allowed to threaten. We're not allowed to attack, but we're allowed to threaten and do whatever we can to intimidate Moab. What's the difference between Ammon and Moab? We have to go back to the origins of those two nations. Ammon and Moab are the children of the two daughters of Lot. So you remember when Lot was escaping Sodom, when the angels came to rescue him, they were hiding in a cave, and Sodom was on fire. And his daughters thought it was the end of civilization as they know it. So they thought they had a responsibility upon them to continue civilization and humanity. And they lived with their father and had these, from this illicit relationship, these two children, Mamzerim, came to the world. And the first daughter, who named her son Ammon from the word nation, she said, we'll build a nation through this. I will bring continuity through this son. And then the second one was more chutzpah, what we say, more brazen. She said, Moab, from father. This son is from father. She advertised the illicit relationship, and she was sort of say, chutzpah, no shame about it. And that's what we're going to learn, something so powerful from this. What's the difference between Ammon and Moab? Is that Ammon we're not allowed to even threaten or attack. Moab we're allowed to threaten because Ammon has more merit, because his mom wasn't as brazen. She did an inappropriate thing, but she had shame about it, versus her sister who did an inappropriate act but had no shame. So we look at this, and we're living in an era where it is cool not to have shame. Like, we're living in a generation where shame has been degraded. Like, there is no shame. It's about whatever I want to do, I could do. And I don't feel any shame about anything, even if it's improper, even if it's immoral. Whatever I want to do, I could do, because that's democracy. That's the epitome of being a liberal. I'm not talking politically, okay? I'm talking right now. I'm talking moral-wise, more from a moral point of view. Just whatever I want goes, and that's the way it goes, And I just announce it and advertise it out there. We're in a generation of a loss of shame, you know. So the other one that had a little shame, so to say, gets some merit, rewarded. We're not allowed to attack her descendants. Versus Moab, she had more chutzpah. Chutzpah begets chutzpah, meaning we could be brazen with Moab because she was brazen, because we are dealing with her descendants the same way she is. And what we could learn from this is a very profound lesson that I was reading in Rabbi Fran's book, is that it's so incredible. Like, here is the daughter of Lot, engaged in a very immoral act, but yet gets rewarded for the fact that she has shame, right? How important it is, you know, that to embrace and not let go of shame, because shame aligns us. Shame keeps us intact, okay? And we should want to do things because it's the right thing to do. But sometimes what helps us, you know, is that we have that inner compass and we feel shame about certain things. And that kind of like brings us back. So let's say I have a desire to say terrible lashon hara. You know, I want to speak gossip about my friend. And I'm itching to say this juicy details about her. But then there's someone there that I know is going to report back to her. So like I'm embarrassed and I'm afraid that I'm going to feel ashamed. So I kind of hold back. That's good. That's a good thing. The next thing that Rabbi Fran was saying, I just want to make sure I'm like not missing anything. So I love the question that he asks. He says like this: it is popular to be upfront, to be open and honest about one's actions, to come out of the closet and do your own thing. Shame is a thing of the past, he says, right? Which is better, modest and dishonest, or honest and immodest? And the Torah gave us the answer by rewarding modesty and dishonesty of Lot's younger daughter. I said before that it was the older daughter, as actually Ammon is Lot's younger daughter. Okay, so that we got the answer for that. Modesty and dishonesty definitely comes over immodesty and honesty. Now, we're going to talk about this very crazy phenomenon, a talking donkey. But tiftach haton et pi haton, and she opened up her mouth. Vayiftach Hashem et pi haton, v'tomer leBilam ma asiti lecha. And God opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Bilam, "What have I done to you?" Can you imagine that you're on a mission to go do something, and you're in your car, and your car keeps stalling, and you keep going out and adding water and putting more gas or whatever, and it's happening. And you might like think, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be going on this mission. Too many weird things are happening to me. And I was once on a road trip that kind of like, it just didn't end. Oh my God, flat tire, then we got a ticket, then it's just like, it was one of those trips where like, with a bunch of kids in the back on the 10 from Texas to Los Angeles, and we're like, why are we doing this? What's wrong with us? You know, why are we suicidal? You know? And you know that it takes like, Israelis wouldn't understand this, but my Texan friends, you know, that it takes like about a day, hours and hours just to get out of Texas, right? Israel could go into Texas 7 times. It's pretty amazing, you know. So most boring ride ever, you know. We're going to LA this summer, and I thought, oh, let's drive to Texas to visit our friends. And my husband is like, don't you remember that you hate it? It's like the most boring ride ever. Going on the 10, it's so flat. It's just desert for like a day and a half. So what's happening here, right? We said Bilam is a very smart guy. He's a wizard. So his IQ is pretty high up there, right? He's not like a dumb person. And yet this phenomenon happens and he's not swayed away. Like you would think he would change his mission. His donkey's talking to him. He says, hey, there's an angel from God with a sword stopping me because you're going on a mission that's inappropriate to go curse the people of God, and you should stop. And yet he's like, he's so zealous about it, right? Because he hates the Jewish people as much as Moab does, right? And he's passionate about it, so he doesn't care. So he rationalizes it. I don't care what the donkey's saying to me, right? I think we need to translate this into our own daily lives, Is there a donkey talking to us that we're completely ignoring? Because we all have a donkey that is talking, and it's so crazy, and it's such a crazy phenomenon, but yet we rationalize it. Okay, we all know what it is. Maybe it's something not as phenomenal as a donkey talking to us, but maybe we're like on a pattern of thought that is limiting, that is bringing us to nowhere, that is spiraling us downwards, and yet we are continuing to go down that path, and there's that little voice talking in you, and strange things are happening, and messages from God reminding you maybe this is not the right path, right? So listen to those messages that come or from a donkey, or from your inner voice, from your inner compass, or from your mother. Maybe it could be your kid, Sometimes, the voice of God comes through many, many ways. It could come through a homeless person in the street, I once had an amazing conversation with a homeless person in DC. I used to run a high school program in San Antonio, and we took them to the amazing program to Washington, D.C. to learn how to lobby and to advocate and to become activists. And also we met with, with activists regarding Israel and getting involved. And one of the things that we did was to engage with homeless people and bring them food and toiletries. And I remember having amazing, very enlightening conversations with some of these homeless people. By the way, so many of them are like with PhDs and masters, and it's really sad. Their life circumstances brought them to that place. And I just have so much respect for some of them. And I remember just amazing conversations with them. And Hashem could be talking to you from the mouth of babes, from the mouth of a homeless person, from a class that you listen to, from an incident that happens to you. You never know. Like there's this constant, the universe is talking to you. A lot of messages that are coming to us various ways, right? But we have to be open to it, And the problem is that when we have blind spots, right? How scary it is to have a blind spot. The other day I was changing lanes and I swiped someone. I actually had a blind spot. I looked in the mirror, but I didn't turn my head. And I hit someone. Thank God it was very light. And this person was so kind. I was more scared than him. And he was calming me down. Like he became my therapist. So, but we all have blind spots, spiritual blind spots. And the idea is to like look around for them, right? And listen to them. Because there's a lot of wisdom out there. Hashem is constantly talking to us. God is constantly talking to us. That's the lesson of the donkey talking to Bilam. Now the next thing that we're going to talk about, it talks about the people of Israel. It says Vayichal, from the root letters of Chol, of mundane. What happens? Vayichal, the people of Israel start living with the women of Moab and acting in ways that are immoral. And what was happening to them is they were so holy, and suddenly they were becoming Milashon Vayichal, from the root letters of Chol, of mundane. They went from being up here on a really high level, people eating manna, right? You know that manna, it was food from heaven, was food of consciousness. They were an elevated consciousness. Actually, they say that manna, that when they were eating manna, they didn't actually have waste. They never had to go to the restroom. It was all consumed. It was all spiritual. It was all perfect. It was all matter without any psolit, without any, the word escapes me right now for some reason. I'm very, very tired. It was no waste. That's the word I'm looking for. No waste. no waste, right? Now this is a spiritual thing here. That's why I'm fixated on this word, to find this word. So what was happening was they went from being spiritual beings, like being in clouds of glory, traveling 40 years in the desert, not connected to Wi-Fi, totally ingrained, like a big long Shabbat, right? Disconnected from the world and the reality of it, not having to work for their money. They didn't have to plant, right? Now they're about to enter Israel. Israel's a very physical place. They're going to go into the land. They got to fight their enemies. They got to conquer the land. They got to grow the land. The land was barren. They're going to take the land. They're going to grow it. Now they're going to have to work for their livelihood, right? And they're going from a place of being very spiritual to very physical. So what happened was, it was like, and the way Hashem did it, the way God created the world, is that we always have the spiritual and the physical connected in order to differentiate. Like if it was always light, and we didn't have darkness, we wouldn't be able to see that it's light. When there's good in the world, there's also evil. It's the forces in the world are very much alike. When evil rises, good rises. When evil, because it's a real fair game of free will, right? So what's happening here is that they're going into the land, and they're going to have to get physical, but within the spiritual world. The job of the Jewish people is to be physical, and elevated to spirituality. I say this all the time, turning the mundane to ordain, connecting